This is the most craziest erotic poetry that I've read in years. Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and to the review of Wet Dreams by Nicole S. Brown. I actually interviewed Nicole S. Brown some weeks ago and we were able to talk about her book. So she has written 14 books of poetry and we discussed the book. And eventually I picked up Wet Dreams and I read it. It's an entirely different poetry. It's a poetry that I consider entirely different, as I'm even shocked I lack words in how best for me to describe the poem after reading it. So after reading Wet Dreams, it's a poetry book and I actually have the soft copy here with me, so the review is more like I'm giving a thought, I'm sharing my ideas, I'm sharing my feedbacks after reading the book, because it's a book of poetry, unlike me telling stories in terms of reviewing all the books. So this actually falls under the genre of erotic poetry. And I want to say that this is not only erotic, it is overly erotic. We have different genres of poetry, and this also can be classified under love poetry. But the level of love, the level of affection, intimate affection conveyed in Nicole S. Brown's Wet Dreams is very different from the kind of love poetry that I've been reading for a very long time. I actually love reading different genres of literature, of poetry, and I haven't really been reading much of love poetry per se, but when I encounter Nicole S. Brown Wet Dreams, it is overly sensual. And this is actually something that's only meant for addicts. There's some content that it has that are not meant to be read by people below 18 years. So this is an adult read. This is a read for matured people. The poetry, to me, is actually fair. There's no way I can judge it, because I feel that poetry are not meant to be judged. What I love mostly in poetry is something that can pull me, that can give me quite a lot of emotion that I desire. But no, this poem actually is not really emotional. The primary aim and the primary theme that were communicated in the book, it's sexual activities, it's relationship with lovers, it's love experiences, it's overbed, on bed experiences, which to me are very typical of the kinds of the poetry, love poetry specifically, that I've been reading and reviewing for quite a lot of time. So I'd love to warn actually that this is not a poem that can be read by people that is below age. Some of the content are actually obscene, and you might find them irritating because of the lyrics, the stanzas used to the poetry. Like I said, maybe there's another genre of love poetry that Wet Dreams will be classified as. I don't know. But from the title, you should have judged that you're reading something quite different from love poetry per se, you would put it. Well, the book is actually divided into 3 sections. The first part is titled Flood of Freakiness, which to me sound a bit fair in terms of the language usage, the lyrics, the content of the lyrics not being too obscene, too lustful, too lewd, and quite disgusting to the ear. Talk about the pond of perversion. But the second section in the book, overly sensitive. Then the river of ranchiness, that's the third part towards the ending part of the book, that is overly sensual. Well, I wouldn't say that I'm a perfect fit or the perfect audience for Wet Dream, but if you're the type that love poetry that are overly sensual, poetry that might even arouse you while reading, poetry that you read some of the lines of the style and be like, oh my god, did someone wrote that? So coming across this sounds like the most craziest erotic poetry that I've ever read in years. And well, it's fine and it's quite recommendable for people that love poetry, whose content are overly erotic. So I would love to talk about some parts in the book. I love to touch on some poems in the book. The first one I love to talk about is Beautiful Chocolate Man, which I think maybe the author or the narrator wrote to express her love for black men. Then some poems actually are quite distinctive and very clear in the sort of information that they seek to convey. And these are poems like Late Night Creep. This particular poem titled Late Night Creep took the style of narrative poetry. That's you telling a story in form of poetry, like I am always familiar with. I have a book whereby some of the poems are told in form of narrative poetry, where you have the narrator speaking. And again, most of the poems in this book are written from the first person point of view with a lot of highs. And this is one of the reasons why I was quite curious to know if Nicole S wrote most of this poetry, most of this poem, from what happened to her particularly, or it's just an imagination, it's just fantasies in her head. I don't know. So most of the poems are written in the first person point of view and have a style more particularly resembling that of someone who is telling a story along the lines, along the stanzas, as the poem keep going on and on and on. Then in Late Night Creep, the narrator talk about her love experiences, how she was able to find love from her past experiences and how she was able to move on from perhaps heartbrokenness or something like that. Then the poem titled Who is Crying Now is very, very sensual, just like all the ones. They're quite obscene. And the language are just quite, there's some poems that you read you might feel uncomfortable. So I love to warn and as well recommend it to those who love sensual poetry that has quite a lot of theme, erotical poetry, one that are very overly sensual and sensitive. One of the parts that struck me most while reading the book was the over and over exposition of a particular theme that I think readers can find in both the first part, the second part, and the third part of the book. And that's the narrator's attempt. The narrator here looks like a woman, like a lady, and that's the narrator's attempt on how she was able to capture another man's heart, another man who is married to another lady. Like the narrator was talking about how the wife of the man he is with, how the wife is not that good in bed, how she wasn't delivering to the expectation of his current partner. And as such, most of the poem are full of offensive languages of how the narrator talks about his partner's wife, how she's that bad in bed, how she texts her messages, how she abuses her, how she feels like she is a curse for her husband not staying at home together with her. So here there's just quite a mix of controversy, I'd say, and the narrator is trying to point fact that this is why she hates me, because I do this, because I satisfy you, because I give you all that you want, because you're always wanting the more of me, and etc. All of that. So this is not just your usual sort of poetry. It is overly sensual, like I said before, and it's a poetry that be good for married people of age, not for young ones actually. So before I stop my video review, I love to recite a particular poem that I love. It's titled More Than a Feeling. So it goes like this. Being with you, dude, is more than a feeling. It is both an inner and outer body experience. It's a sweet escape of the world's rejection. In order for both of us to have an abundant attraction for every action of negativity towards our being, we have a stronger desire for each other to be seen, not only seeing but using our other four senses on each other as well, hearing the whisper, moan, cursing and screaming, seeing the undressing, the facial expressions and the body movement, tasting creamy chocolate, a wide wind of whipped cream from each other's bodies gives us a healing that is more effective than drinking a hot toddy. It feels like we're dreaming in the escape, but it's a reality and it's more than a feeling. So more than a feeling, it's actually a poetry in the book that really stand with me, that I kind of admire among all the poems there. So if you're a lover of love poetry, if you're a lover of erotical poetry, you might want to pick up Wet Dreams by Nicole S. And I left a link in the description part of this review if you'd love to get a copy directly on Amazon. So this is actually gonna be my short video book recommendation actually on Wet Dreams by Nicole S. And one of the things I want to say is that, Nicole S. have quite a lot of other books, some of which I found to be spiritual for merely browsing through them. But one of the things I love to ask and say in this review is that while reading through the content of the poetry here in Wet Dreams, I was kind of surprised, and some of the poems got me questioning Nicole S. Brown's morals. And I was like, oh my god, she wrote that, she wrote that, that's too typical. That's overly sensitive. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I love to question her morals. Well, I don't know if most of those poems are somewhat autobiographical or somewhat, something about experiences, I can't tell. But all in all, it's fine for those who are interested in love poetry. It's a good recommendation and a good read for those who love erotic poetry. So thank you so much for watching my short video book recommendation of Wet Dreams by Nicole S. See you in my next video. Goodbye.